phase of um, um, I think I'm taking the first phase and the last phase. I think the other tutor is taking the second phase. So after this first phase, there'll be an award-winning prize, a token, um, to the highest scoring students in terms of the assessments that were given. Hmm? So yeah, I hope we'd all be looking forward to that. I think um, Daniel should send a broadcast message to that respect, and what we'll be looking out for before the end of tomorrow. Right. And yeah, that'll be it. Just before we start, we start very shortly. All right. Sorry, Badmos. I think this is my first time of seeing you on the call. Am I be wrong? Am I right, Badmos?
I was here in the last class. Right. My second to
Okay, okay. Nice to meet you, Badmos. You can you introduce yourself.
you said?
Can you introduce yourself? Your name, department, your hobbies. Yeah.
My name is Michael Badmus. I'm a pharmacy student, 300 level.
Oh, all right. That's great. Also, what do you do for your hobbies? What are your hobbies like?
I don't really have a hobby.
Hmm.
Uh, but
Yeah.
I read. I like reading. Yeah, yeah, just basically that. I like reading, and I'm also interested in research. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. That's nice. But please get a very allow me to use the word things that you just do to relax. You know. Um. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Pharmacy. Yeah. Pharmacy is very interesting. I know that. Okay. So sorry to put the spotlight on you a bit more. So what do you intend to do with pharmacy? Can you share with us what you intend to do with pharmacy just after college of medicine?
All right. So I after school I plan to probably go into create an health tech startup. Yeah,
Hmm, great,
basically. So
great.
you said,
That's great. What kind of health tech are we looking at?
yeah, something that goes into probably managing health
Okay.
data, basically, because I noticed that the current situation of the country, data is not really accessible generally. The country has that poor, what's it called? We don't have data accessible for companies abroad that want to use data for research and other stuff like that. So it's my hope, Sha, that makes it settle. It's something
Oh.
I should probably work on. So there's a lot of regulations around data management in the country currently, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't know how things can work out in the nearest future.
Yeah. All right. Just that's a very beautiful ambition. I could recommend guys to you that can who are already in the field. That could you know give you some industry experience. I know a couple of guys that I don't know if you've heard of Helium Health. Helium Health. Have you heard of Helium Health? So basically, Helium Health is an is a records the records health records company and health technology company. So you can talk just chat me up in my DMs. I'll link you up with guys out in this one. So yeah, I think we'll be starting right away. Um, all right. So I'll share my screen on what we will be putting the spotlight on um tonight. But just before we start, any questions? Any questions? Any comments? Commentations? Vexations? conclusions, recommendations, whatever it is. Anybody? I'm really interested in hearing one or two. Anybody? Okay. So I get to assume that you don't have them come up. All right. So would that right into slated in? Okay. Mhm. All right. Sorry, I'll be presenting directly from my phone. I'm sorry for every inconvenience. All right. Um, I'll take it from my phone. Okay. So can we all see my screen?
Yeah, it's
Can
just
we all
on
see my
his.
small,
Try
right?
increasing your screen.
All right.
Maybe
I'll just
if you hit your phone or something. That all right. Okay. So yeah, I know that we had an abrupt disconnection. That was last week, when we were taking the step by step, practical write up of a methodology. But I did quite a work on the pre-recorded session, which I believe will be of great benefit to every one of us. So we can just after I have this class, we can dive right into it. Okay. So yeah. So I don't think I would have to go back into all of that since I've spoken about them already in the recorded session. So the spotlight will be on um, methods. Okay. Um, yeah. So methods. I believe we should have a good grasp of the different uh, methodological approaches when it comes to research. Okay. So why do we have methods as a very important part of research? Okay, so let me give you an example, which I often love to do. Um, there is something we call a false positive. Okay, a false positive. I think that one of the ones I witnessed when I tried to get involved in political research, that means research in terms of policies, you know, and but not just policies this time, but trying to vote people into power where they have to like count voters and polls, basically polls. All right. So when you take polls, all right, just like our recently concluded, not recently, the elections that we just had as a country, Nigeria, um, we had three, very potent candidates from three democratic parties. Yep. So, oftentimes you will find, polls flying around that, oh, we have, let's say, 70% of the voters, having a preference for a particular candidate. All right. Now, the question you always have to ask is, how did you get that number? Okay. Now, the first thing I always probe. Now, if you hear the word percentage, 70%, 80%, 90%, don't be distracted as a researcher by that percentage. Always ask, what is the sample size? Okay, what is the sample size? Yeah. How many people did you count? You can literally go to a class, okay, or let's say we have 36 states in Nigeria, and you only took that poll uh, in 10 states, and Within that 10 states, five of those states were, for example, I know one of the current president was much preferred within the Western region. Okay, so within 10 states, you went to the West, and half of those states were from the Western region. We have three of them from the North, which we had quite, a bit of interested voters in that region. And then we went to the East, where I believe was not much preferred. Okay, and that's where you took the poll. That is what we call a false positive. Why? Because there is a bias. There is a bias in selection. Now, this is very important in research because this is what critics always look out for. Okay, so where did you get those people from? Now, haven't told us. So I was talking about percentage, right? So you pick 10%, you pick 10 states from how many states do you have in Nigeria, guys? So quickly remind me before I say something wrong. Oh,
That's 36.
36 states, good. That's less than 5%. That's sorry, that's less than 50%. Okay. All right. So there are research processes that determine that gives us a reasonable amount of selection. Because um, you can't except you have billions of dollars to spend, which is not, is never the ideal. It's like 1% of all the situations, except you are being funded by WHO, you're being funded by CDC, you're being funded by Bill Gates. All right, you can't have that amount of money to go through all the states, and even if you go through all the states, you can't sample all the eligible voters in that state. So there is a process, there is a statistical or there's a process of research that gives you a level. In research, nobody's ever 100%. Okay, we are simply trying to get the most reasonable um, um, or the most probable fact as possible. Okay, all right. So you pick 10 states out of 36. That's less than 50% in the first state. And within each state, you only sampled 100 people. So that means that in total, we're having just 1,000 people. 1,000 people. Okay, let's be lenient a bit. Let's say you only picked 10,000 people per state, um, of 10 states. Okay, so that's 10 times 10,000. So that's 100,000 people. So 100,000 people amongst over 200 million people. Or I don't know how many registered voters we had, but let's say 100 million registered voters. That's you know is that's a biased sampling. Okay, so there are different methods by which we can reduce that bias, which is always and always and always the goal. That's the goal all the time. You're trying to reduce that bias. You're trying to sound as reasonable as possible. You're trying to sound as systematic as possible. Okay, so these are the methods that we use. And how do you determine what method to use um, at every point in time? Okay, so the first method that I would like to discuss with us is the simple random selection. Okay, now as the name implies, a simple random selection means that you are okay. How many of us play um, board games? Let's say, for example, Ludo. Uh, you uh, you are you have two dice. Okay, you you're expecting to get the highest number possible, which is double six, a double of six on each dice. Okay, so you are blindly you are blindly rolling out. Okay, you are blindly rolling out your dice. You are not a gambler who is rolling with loaded dice. You are not pre-selecting. That's the word. You are not pre-selecting. So you are randomly checking. Now, you are randomly selecting. So in what instances do we have a random selection? You use the random selection where you have an infinite amount of possible selection. Okay, you are not exactly definite about the total number of people that fits within your research population. All right, you want to, for example, carry out the research to find out the knowledge about um, um, about those in the informal sector in Mushin local governments concerning health insurance. You want to find out those working in the informal sector, what is their level of knowledge about health insurance. Okay, we don't have that database accurately. I remember I was contacted by someone who works for BOI, that's the Bank of Industry. They wanted to get quite a number of database. They wanted to build a database for the informal sector. Now, what do I mean by the informal sector? The informal sector in Nigeria is basically sectors, job sectors within Nigeria that are not formal, they are not professional. Your tailors, your bus drivers, your welders, the market women, the tailors. Those are not registered. Many of them are not registered businesses. Okay, all right. And as a country, the Bank of Industry published just recently that they make up about 43% of our GDP as a country. Okay, so but we're trying to find out, what's the level of knowledge. That's what you picked Moshi um as your as your local government of choice, which I actually did in my undergraduate project. So what I did basically was to pick Moshi local government. Moshi local government has 14 districts. Um, Out of that 14 districts, I by simple random selection. Now, what did I do? I wrote, now this might look very crude, but that's the way it is. Under simple random, we have what we call balloting. Balloting. I'm sure some of us have done balloting before, where you blindfold papers. Okay. So I wrote in papers uh, the 14 districts. Okay. On that machine we have. I'm trying to remember now. I can't recall exactly, but I wrote out all the districts, all the 14 districts, and then I folded them in paper. Then I blindly selected four districts out of that out of the 14 districts. Okay, so why? Because guys, you need to go back to that video. Okay, there's something I want to mention now. It's called sample size determination. I count my sample size is 400 respondents. Okay, maybe just after the sampling method, I'll go back to it. Okay, I'll go back to it. Just a minute. So just to confirm, am I still audible? I don't want to cut
Yes.
on a. All right, guys, thank you very much. Okay. Um, all right. Okay. So I had a sample size of 400. So my intention then was to split that 400 across the four districts, which is 100 across the four districts. Okay. All right. So after picking the four districts, which I did by so simple random has some other sub approaches to it. A balloting is one of the words you can use to describe it. Okay, all right. So after selecting those four districts by balloting, and then under each district they have wards. Okay? They have wards. They have ward A, ward B, ward C, ward D. So I each district had two wards each. So I selected again by balloting one ward from each of those districts, and then I picked eight. So yeah. So I had another selection process which I had to pick the streets that I would be going into. Okay. So how did I select the street? It was by simple random. Okay. I narrowed it down to saying I only want to get five informal business owners from each street. So I listed out all the streets and picked that amount, just five divided by 100. Okay. Then I picked that number of streets. Okay. Now when I got to the street, now simple random means that let's assume we have 50 tailors on the street. Okay. I would now there's something we now call um um how do I let me break this down a bit more. So simple random, I go to the street, I have 50 tailors. I would have trained some research assistants. Let's assume that we are like four of us collecting that data. They would go in an haphazard manner to collect that data. They're not saying, let me go to the tailor shop. After you collect data from this person, they're just picking by random. Okay, let me go to this person. Let me just select this person. All right? Are we together on that? So that's a simple random selection process. We spent a couple of time on that. So stratified sampling. So what is stratified sampling? Stratified sampling is that um, I have 500 medical students. Oh, sorry. I came to the College of Medicine. I want to find out um, students' knowledge about. I think I did one, which was I assisted in one rather, which we're looking out for students' knowledge about sunscreen, for example. Okay, by dermatology department. So we our method of sampling was by cluster. Now, so was stratified. Now, stratified means that we are ensuring that every group is represented. We are making sure that every group is represented equally. Guys, you need to make a clear distinction between stratified and cluster. So just pay attention, all right? So um, stratified means that I want to ensure that every group, whatever way you want to group it, you might want to group it by if you're in the community, for example, you might want to represent the group by ethnicity. Okay, so I'll say, oh, I must have 100 Yoruba people in this study. I must have 100 Igbo people in this study. I must have 100 Hausa people in this study, and I must have 100 Edo people in this study. So that's stratified. So I must have 100 medical students in this study. I must have 100 pharmacy students in this study. I must have 100 hematology. So I'm ensuring. So I'm going to split my sample size across every department represented. All right. So that's for stratified sampling. Now, cluster sampling means that I am selecting them irrespective of the representation. I am selecting them by groups. Okay. Now, groups mean that uh, I'm not really particular about representation. I'm just making sure that my data is okay. So, a very simple example of cluster sampling is gender, for example. Okay. Gender means that I go to a class and say, oh, now, we are not really particular about that in our region here because we don't have that gender, people being very fluid with their selection of what they call gender. All right, so I can say I want just males and females, irrespective of how they are represented in my data collection process. All right, now convenience sampling. All right, so can you give me a minute? Sorry, can you see them, guys? Just a minute. Okay, okay. So are we together, guys? So I stopped at convenience sampling, right? Okay. So convenience sampling basically means um, I want to so right, okay, okay. All right. So convenience sampling simply means that I I usually call it the lazy approach. Okay. It's a lazy approach. I simply say it's like you're just selecting by percentage. Okay, we would keep collecting this data, all right, until we have 50% of the people in our population represented. Okay, I'll keep collecting this data until I have all the males in this class. I'll keep collecting this data until I have all the pregnant women in this health facility represented. I'll keep collecting this data until I have all the men who have done a prostate cancer screening in this clinic. All right, I don't think you are getting me. So I make sure that I want to collect this data until I have all the women who are registered for antenatal clinic at least 4 weeks in my study. I hope you get what I'm saying. All right. So purposive sampling. Purposive sampling simply means that you um
Hey, sorry,
you
I'm very sorry. I thought
okay.
you said for the convenience it's until you have like 50%
No, no, no.
of
I
the
give that as an
population.
example. I give that as an example.
So you must have the whole
No, yeah,
population.
no, no, no. It's not necessarily the whole population. You're the one as a researcher. You're the one more like you have a blank check to determine. So the determination is between yourself and the stakeholders.
Okay.
Maybe you are given a grant,
Thank you.
for example. Okay, yeah. So maybe you are given a grant, for example, to get okay the stakeholders or the grant suppliers and say, oh, we need one. For example, let me give an example. There's a study I wrote for University of Pennsylvania. They wanted to do an epigenetic study at the oncology center here on road. Now, after I calculated my sample size, the study would ideally need, let's say, 385 people, people with breast cancer. Yeah, they wanted to take their like, DNA samples and all of that. But what the feedback I got for them that don't worry that they are willing to go as much as 1,000. That means we just keep collecting. We just keep collecting until we reach our desired. So more like convenience and desire, really. You understand? Am I clear on that?
Yes, thank you.
Very much. All right. So purposive sampling means that so purposive sampling really works with your inclusion and exclusion criteria. All right. I think I spoke about that in the last class. Oh no, I didn't. I did it on the video. All right. So you selected that we want to reach this population of people. For example, let's assume the NHIA, that's the National Health Insurance Authority. They want to deploy um, a student um, retainership. I think they call it retainership for paying for their medical bills. All right. They they provide those funds, you know, based on a singular purpose, just for students. It's just for students. So the number can change every year based on the number of students the school admits. All right. So the sample size is not determined by a mathematical process. It's simply determined by what is available. Okay, what is available? What do we have? You understand? And usually, proposing something is usually all encompassing, everybody included. Proposing something, an example of proposing sampling is we want to sample all the chief medical directors of health institutions in Lagos. We can have them you know at, um, at a single figure. I don't think we have up to 1,000 health institutions in Lagos, right? So you understand? So that's purposive sampling. Then the consecutive sampling, usually I don't know if any of us still remember mathematics in school where we learned about um, progression, arithmetic and geometric progression, where you have your n plus something, n plus one, n plus three. Right. So consecutive sampling has a twist of simple random selection, but this time I usually call consecutive sampling a systematic is it systematic? Yeah, a systematic, simple, random selection. All right, that means you are not just blindly selecting, you are selecting mathematically. All right. Um, so you say, for example, the one we did recently at the endocrinology clinic for diabetes patients with type 2 diabetes. We wanted to find out their level of drug adherence. Okay, so ideally, we usually get about let's say 30 to 40 patients on a daily basis. That range um, of people who come to the clinic. All right. So what we did was that we said, okay, we're gonna have a a a n plus two selection a n plus two selection process. Now, what does n mean? N means the number of patients who were booked for an appointment for clinic for that day. Okay, um, divided by let's say divided by five. Let us say we have 40 patients for clinic that day. Um, we will now say after we pick the first patient, okay, we will go, so it will be n plus 2. So n is 1, that's 1 is the first patient. Then the next patient we'll be picking is 1, 2, the second patient. So we're on the second patient now, so it's now be n plus another 2. So we'll be picking the fourth patient. So n plus another 2, that's 4 plus 2. We'll be picking the sixth patient that comes in on the appointment list. So that's the way it goes. So it's now be 8 plus 2, the 10th patient, the 12th patient, the 14th patient, and all. All right. So are we good on that for the sampling method? And I'm sure it's usually one of the most technical part, but I'm sure it shouldn't be much. It shouldn't be much of a problem. Um, and also, don't get intimidated by all the jargon in our methodology. Usually, expertise comes when you get it right as well. And also, coming with our cash, calling with our price. I think I'll be selecting two students from this cohort after this training who would I think if if they're interested just to work with me on some projects, just to gain some real time experience. I don't know if the community is willing to stretch it. We can pick like the first five. But I like when there's competition. Competition brings out the best. I would personally want to. I don't know what the admins want, but two is fine. Okay. All right. So
Uh, okay, I'm actually interested in that.
okay.
I'm
All right.
very
So
thank you.
after the end of the training, after the third week, we'll have a scoreboard and pick. I would pick the first two. But if there's maybe funding opportunities, then and the admin wants us to have more, then I'll go on with that. So yeah, I wanted us to go back to the sample size determination, but I think once we're able to go back to the video, we should be able to get a good perspective on that. Yeah. Okay, but let me. I would allow us to go back. Send me questions in the classroom, then I would attend to them if we have. So I gave an example here. So I said here that clearly states what sampling method you would use, um, such as explain why you chose the method. So if you say I'm going to pick um, a stratified method, you should defend it. That's because I want every group represented to be every group in that my population to be represented equally. All right. For example, I said so the study that I cited that I used for this slide presentation, I will send the link also to the classroom. It was a study that we did on the knowledge and attitude of pregnant women who attended FMC Multimeter Antenatal Clinic. So we find out their knowledge and attitude towards modifiable risk factors to congenital anomalies. Right? So in that study, we used a simple random sampling method. So basically, what we did was we went to the clinic on every day. We went to the clinic. We blindly met any pregnant woman who was ready to give us, a consent on interview. So, all right, there was no, systematic approach to it. So we've now spent approximately 30 minutes. Okay, okay, let's go again. Um, yeah, I think I talked about the data collection too in the last class, but I think the network didn't really allow us to get a very good perspective. So I was talking about data collection too as the performer, your questionnaire, your database. Okay. But I think I'd like us to little in terms of database, you can have two kinds of data. You can have a secondary data. You can also have a primary data. Secondary data means um, the data is already ready for you in a database. Now, um, institutions around the world that have this kind of data, for example, Google has crazy amount of data when it comes to, even this meeting we are having, I'm sure Google has that information, you know, and they run crazy algorithms on the back end, with those information. I'm sure you probably must have been having a conversation with a friend of yours. Or I'm trying to take a trip, a holiday trip to Italy, for example. You want to see the Champions League finals. You're just having a conversation with your friend, and you're just on your Facebook or you're on Instagram, and you're seeing Booking.com sending you ads. Oh, plan your next, trip, plan your next summer trip, plan your next, and you're like, were these guys in my mind? So basically, what's happening is that there's a back end, fishing those information from you and storing it in the database, and the algorithms now run, analysis and use it to generate ads for you. Your primary data collection process is basically um, like a real-time data collection process. All right, so that will lead me to where's that guy again? Huh? Oh, I wonder where that slide is. I wonder where that slide is. I wonder where it is. My God. Hmm. Is it here? Presenting my phone is pink. Um, but guys, I hope we are with the pen. Okay, yeah, it's here. I think is it? Okay, yeah, it's here. So that will lead me to um um different types of you know how do I what word would I use for this now? Like a design approach. Okay, so a design approach would be yeah, this slide doesn't cut it, but I'll do my best. So usually there's something called a so I said Google is right here collecting data from us, just as we're in this meeting. It's a real time data. Okay. So a real time data is they're collecting that information at that particular point in time. For example, in your 500 level project or your final year project, what you're doing is that you're going to the community to find out if somebody, let's say for example, if somebody is interested in taking up a health insurance scheme, you can go back there the next day and the person mind has changed. Okay, so what we call that is a cross-sectional data. Sorry, a cross-sectional survey. Okay, it's a cross-sectional survey. At that point in time, that is the information you have. You must have decided that, oh, I think I want to go to Italy for my holiday, but you were on. Oh, you were just talking to a colleague at the office, and the person mentioned that, oh, I just got these new pairs of, or let's say maybe Louis Vuitton has a walk show in what's that favorite place you usually go to again? In Paris. They're like, okay, I think since the next summer walkway from Louis Vuitton is in Paris, I think I'll just go to Paris instead. Your data, your information concerning where you choose as your holiday point has changed. So me as a researcher, I do an analysis that, oh, 20% of people in Lagos want to go to Italy for their holidays for the Champions League final. All right, but the next day that may not be accurate again. The probably must have reduced to like 12%. So that's the cross-sectional survey. And usually, the cross-sectional surveys are usually influenced by maybe a change in exposure to an information, all right, a change in location, a change in financial status, a change in marital status, a change in age. For example, you know, what you wanted, what you wanted as a kid, 14-year-old, is definitely what you want now as an adult. Okay, so cross-sectional these activities over time. All right, yeah. So what other methods do we have? We have, so please guys just notify me once. I think let me check if I'm still audible. I think Donna usually sends a message on WhatsApp once I'm not audible. All right. Okay. All right. So what other method do we have? After a cross-sectional data, we have what we call um, a pre and post. A pre and post. So they call it interventional study, interventional approach. So an intervention means that, okay, so let me give you a very practical example. Like I think I've mentioned this before. We are currently doing a study in Lasso amongst the women living with HIV about their knowledge and willingness to uptake um, a dual contraception. A dual contraception means these women are on two, at least two, no, sorry, actually two contraceptive methods, either a barrier method or an emergency, drug, you know. So we're trying to find out their willingness to uptake, those contraceptives. So we collected a pre-data. Now a pre-data means, because now when we're collecting a pre-data, we're collecting a pre-data because we have an intention of exposing them. So we call it exposure. We have an intention of exposing them to an information. So before we expose them to the information of what um, dual contraception is, we would have collected what is their base knowledge. Now, usually in studies like that, you have what we call it's a case and control. It's intertwined. We have a case and control. Now, a control means that okay, this population we are not going to expose them to the education of what dual contraception is, and the other population, which is our case, is that we want to expose them to what dual contraception is. Okay, so for both populations, we collect a pre-data. Okay, so let's assume that after collecting the pre-data, those within the control group, I mean, those who we are not going to expose to the information, have an information that means 60% of them were aware of dual contraception. And amongst those who we want to educate about dual contraception, let's assume they have 30% of them are aware of dual contraception. Then we leave those who were not exposed, we leave them, okay, and then we now go after educating the case population. We taught them, we did like a 3 weeks training for them, taught them how to where to get those contraception, the benefits, the possible side effects, the cost, where to get them, basically just educating them. Then we now go back again, those same set of people, then we collect another data from them. Then we can now find out, did that information improve their willingness and their awareness of that drug contraception? And then we do the same for the control group. Guys, I hope I'm not sounding too technical. Someone to give me feedback. Any question? Anybody? Just say something. You can unmute yourself if you have to.
To me, you are a little bit technical, but then it's fine. I know we are just starting.
Sorry, can you come again?
I said to me, you are sounding a little bit technical.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I knew this time would come, but I'm trying to carry us as much as possible. All right.
Yeah.
So I really hope this session is recorded so you can always go back to it. Also send you materials too. All right. So and the thing is that I'm trying not to so in medicine they would say common things occur commonly. There are more, a bit of more advanced methodological approaches. But I'm trying to take, one or two very common ones that happen. But don't worry, I'm sure. Um, as you keep staying around research, these things will come very familiar to you. I'm telling you, they're not really technical as they sound. As we keep going, I'm sure you'll get a hang of it. All right, guys, can I go to the next phase?
Yeah, I think we
Permission to
can
go
go
to
to
the
the
next
next.
phase. Sorry.
Yeah, we can move forward now.
All right, thank you. So, okay, so another kind of design approach we can have is what we call a cohort study. All right, a cohort study would be okay. Let's take for example one of the very popular ones that people use as examples when they're talking about cohorts is let me remember. So there was this era where there was like a tobacco boom. Okay, tobacco was everywhere. People were consuming tobacco in indiscriminate proportions. It was everywhere because why? It had as the world was growing more cosmopolitan, people wanted to stay awake more. People wanted to get energy drive in one or two places. People wanted to feel something. The nicotine in those products it was everywhere. And um, a scientist, I'm trying to remember his name now. I can't. Had an hypothesis that majority of people. So, like I said, remember, guys, remember, I talked about hypothesis. You have an assumption. Okay, so he assumed now those assumptions are based on proper clinical observation. So he observed that people were coming down with lung cancer a lot at that time. There were a lot of people coming down with lung cancers, and then so he picked. So what he did was that he picked certain number of people, and he so he did like how do I put this? Mm, so he he exposed, or sorry, those who were naturally exposed to tobacco, either direct or indirectly, he he just simply took he followed them up over a period of time. Okay, so that means he took data of, okay, when did you start smoking? Okay, let's assume that okay, he wants to recruit people who has been smoking for 5 years. All right, then they are put under observation over a period of time. You're watching them, they keep smoking like 3 packs a day. As you're smoking, you're also taking data of if they're smoking packs, the number of packs they smoke per day is it increasing, like a step wedge approach. All right. So at the end of, let's say they've been exposed over a period of like 10 years, okay, then you now do like diagnostic findings. How many of them have lung cancer? How many of those? How many of them don't? Okay. So this one is not a case control. Everybody is exposed to the same thing. Okay. Everybody is exposed to the same thing. Then you now calculate it, statistically. Um, is there a significant correlation? So they call them correlation. They call it correlation rather. Is there a significant correlation between in the let's say in the duration of exposure, numbers of cigarette smokes per day, and all of what a cohort design? It's not usually, except you are very deep into clinical research. You have to do that. You have a couple of funding. For example, one of our professors here, popularly known, Professor Afolayan, is doing a cohort study. All right, the patients are on they're monitoring for over a period of 2, 3, 5 years, thereabout. Okay. So the study like I cited that we did at FMC Butemeta, we simply did a descriptive cross-sectional, study that we just used to find out people's level of knowledge, attitude, and prevention of maternal risk to congenital heart disease. All right. Okay. So yeah, ethics, which I think we'll be rounding up with. We've now spent 45 minutes in this section. So I want you guys to take a break. Let's take a 3 minutes break. Stretch your legs, um, twist your necks, grab a bottle of water, and could just come back in 3 minutes with questions. Are we good? All right, guys. We dropped to um, 4 of us on the call. Was it because of the break they dropped off? Dan, was it just after I announced the break?
No, I'm not sure. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Yes. Maybe they got tired or something. I don't know.
Yeah. All
But the
right.
course is recorded.
Oh, great, great, great. So we'll start in 2 minutes. All right, guys. Okay, so let's round up. All right, let's round up. So this is going to be very brief, like 5-10 minutes. We're done. So looking at ethical consideration. So usually ethics is like after preparing a very beautiful cake.
I'm sorry, we can't see your screen.
Oh yeah, no. This doesn't have
Okay.
yeah. So usually ethics is very broad. If I was to, I'll try to put it in a slide presentation, but usually it comes in a document, in folders, in PDFs, a couple of pages you have to go through. All right, but I'll discuss it globally, and then I'll also discuss it locally, what we can apply locally to what we do. All right, so basically, ethics is like a beautiful foil. Okay, so let's assume you make a very beautiful cake, and imagine the cake is very delicious and very beautiful, beautifully prepared, very sweet, very amazing, and you wrap it up in what's the worst thing you can wrap something like that with? Let's say you wrap it up with a dirty rag, a rag that has been used to mop the gutter, and you wrap it up with it. No matter how beautiful or how delicious the cake is, you would want to stay. You wouldn't want to associate yourself with it. You would even try to even test it. Why? It's not being presented well. Okay. All right. So ethics is what we build. The most beautiful findings and research. You know. So I'll discuss it in the public health aspect. I'll discuss it also clinically. So so ethics have gone through, different modifications over the period of years. Now, there are some major events in the history of mankind, I mean, clinically now, that, led to what we have today as ethical approaches. For example, the very common one was when we had the Nazi, the Nazis, you know, in very inhumane manner, they, took prisoners and used them to test drugs, used them to test, you know, um, use them to test death equipment, use them to do all sorts, unlike what we have today. You first of all test it on rats, then you go to test it on maybe a mammal, a very close mammal to the human, before you even now seek, permission to go to another fish to test it on humans and all of that. These guys just, because they are prisoners, not necessarily prisoners, because of their like war, war outcomes, and they indiscriminately pick up people and then use them for whatever purpose they want to use them for. So conferences came up, to review such approaches, and then certain ethical guidelines were released. Okay, so I think one of the assignments I'm going to give and put up on the classroom is that you would look out for, there are certain events, I'll put them up, that led to very stringent ethical considerations. Okay. Um, another significant event was the syphilis the syphilis um, event in North America. So basically, what happened was in North America, um, there was a test to see if a microorganism, you know, actually was the cause of death among males at the time. So basically, what was happening was black people were just picked up at different corners of the street. They were not told, they weren't told what they were. They just simply told them that, oh, you want to do this research, come. You don't want to be a you want to be a participant of this research, just come in. I'm gonna give you a certain amount of dollars. Are you interested? There was no information, there was no detail on what they were going to inject them with. There was nothing. Basically, the people were, because definitely at those times in those regions there was quite a bit of poverty. Okay, so they took advantage of that situation and then took advantage of those lives. Yeah, and so they picked them up, injected syphilis into them, watched them. Some of them died. A number of them died in the process. Almost all of them died in that process. And the authorities found out what was happening, and then ethical institutions. Now I think that's what we now have. These are very common, very popular informed consent. That means every study you must adequately inform your participants, right, on what you're about to do to them. You're about to ask them questions. You must tell them the potential risks. You must let them know what are the potential benefits. You must let them know what are the aim and what's the aim of the research, what their data will be used for, and all of that. Okay. I'll send us also and a template for informed consent by the HREC in loose. They have their own format where you have to like document your ethical statements. Okay. All right. So another thing again in ethical consideration is that there's something we call conflict of interest. Okay. So usually conflict of interest means as the researcher, you must clearly state what is in it for you in this study. It's very easy to have billionaires who, and someone said something to me. I was in a meeting with the Commissioner of Health, where he said, companies in the US, they spend billions. Whenever some companies in the US give you $10,000, sorry, $10 million, just know that there's an embedded, interest of making at least times 4 of that money back. Okay. So usually in things like that, their conflict of interest is not stated. They can come and say, "Oh, you're a gynecologist, or let's say you're a pharmacist. You're quite good with clinical trials. Let's give you $1 million. Help us find out. Help us find out what is the genetic state of people when they take Viagra, and let's know the adverse reactions. And then, as a good clinical researcher, you're able to document properly what people's reactions to what Viagra is at the moment, what their complaints were, the side effect, and all of that. You're able to take also genetic samples, and you return it back to them. Oh, beautiful, clearly done research. But they didn't clearly, they didn't clearly, declare to you what they were going to use that data for. What could happen was that they'll probably pick up molecules in Viagra, modify it, to mitigate the most common adverse reactions that people complained about in your study. And then they come up with a super drug, okay? And they're selling it for excruciating amounts because people now prefer it. I'm going to make boatload of money, from such. So usually in studies like that, if agencies or certain ethical bodies backtrack, to the research documents that led to the innovation of that drug, and they can't find a clear statement of a conflict of interest, okay, they have the right, the ethical bodies have the right to, you know, to file those people to judiciary, sittings. Okay, so usually there are certain bodies that are responsible for ensuring that studies adhere to ethical processes. So very commonly the one we have here in LUS is the HREC, LUS HREC, they call it. We also have CML, HREC. So HREC is Health Research Ethics Committee. I think the current chairman there is a professor in the dentistry department. That's I worked with her recently. What's her name again? Professor Shufola. Yeah, very beautiful woman. She's very detailed. I really love her work. So she's the current chairman. So whatever study you want to carry out within this vicinity, you must get an HREC clearance. That means you're filing your proposal. Then within that proposal, you attach your ethical consideration form, which is what you clearly state your informed consent, potential risk, benefits, the title, the aim, the questionnaire you want to use, and also you attach. So there's something called CITI. I believe, guys. I think that's one of the things you should take home and ensure. So once you go to CITIprograms.com, just search CITI programs. There are certificates that every researcher should have. Else, you won't be cleared to carry out any research in any part of the world. There's another one called GCP. GCP is an ethical clearance for people who want to go into, if people that want to carry out clinical trials, clinical research, basically. GCP is a good clinical practice. Yeah. So in LUT here, you submit, your proposal, the informed consent, the pro forma you want to use, and you must attach your CITI certificate. All right. So the ethical committee basically review, all right, and if they have any clarifications that they need from you, they'll mail you back. Oh, we need to have clarification of this. Why are you asking this question from people within this community? Can you state, certain things, a methodological approach? You can critique those things in its entirety. Okay, and one of the ones, for example, you are also meant to, declare finances, in your ethical processes. You should declare that, oh, this study is funded maybe by an external body, by an institution, by an NGO, by a foundation, either locally or internationally. Also, in your ethical consideration, you would clearly state, oh, is the project funded by myself? Is this self-funded? All right, and all of that. Yeah. So, guys, I think that's it for now. We spent approximately an hour, and I hope it has been very um, significant and well good use of your time. Thank you very much. I think I'll take questions now. We can call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moses. Does anyone have questions? You can ask right now. Anyone? No questions at all. All right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question. With regards to funding, what what's the process of getting funding for research process? Like,
Okay.
is there is there a process that you what's the process you have to go through as like we are taking Nigeria for example, like in the Nigeria space?
All right. All right. Okay. So, myself personally, for my undergraduate project, I got a grant from the Lagos State Health Insurance Scheme. That's the Ilera Eco, and that's because my project was within that topic. I was looking at people's awareness, a level of knowledge, their willingness to uptake Ilera Eco as an health insurance scheme for themselves and for their families. All right. So usually, what you do is you have an idea which you already have it in the proposal format. Then you can send it to organizations who would who would have who would benefit from your findings in that sense. And if they accept it, fine. So one of the ways you can do is by approaching bodies, institutions, and some NGOs that need that data, some NGOs that need that information, they need those findings and all. Also, because there are various reasons why you need funding for your study. Major reasons: logistics, payment of research assistants, payment of for publication. You also want to get some materials, right? Maybe you want to draw blood samples. You need collection bottles and all of that. And also to for personnel, that's yourself as a researcher. Just a remuneration to see you through the process. For example, um, yeah. So another way you can get funding is there are some institutions that make call outs. Call outs are basically like an announcement for a grant opening. So okay, guys, someone you guys write this down. You can look up this page. There's a Canadian institution, McGill. Let me spell it in the chat box. McGill University. I know every year they let me see. McGill is spelled McGill. Yeah, McGill University. So you can search McGill University up. McGill University. They call it what do they call it again? Oh my god, forgotten. So McGill search for McGill undergrad undergrad undergrad. Someone remind me. I'll get the link and send it to the group chat. So McGill underground grant. Yep, just look it up. So their own focus is on maternal and child health. So you just search McGill MHC, McGill maternal MCH, maternal and child health undergraduate grant. So yeah, I applied last year, but I didn't get. That's because the person who my lecturer was supposed to supervise me was not in the country at the time, so I didn't get proper supervision on it. So you can show up interest, come up with a very interesting topic. Usually, there are some topics that are very like high sounding. When you're talking about pregnancy, sickle cell in pregnancy, anemia in pregnancy, malaria and pregnancy, HIV and pregnancy. Those are things that are very endemic in our areas. If it has a very broad, level of significance, definitely, and you have a proper supervisor on the project, yeah, you get lucky, you get the grant. But the thing is, you don't stop, you don't stop searching as a researcher for grant opportunities. There's another one I know, although that one's for postgrad. Emory. Emory is like the second best public health university in the world, just after John Hopkins. Yeah, so they have this cohorts every year where they give certain amount of grants to postgraduate students in the public health space for funding. Yeah. I'm trying to recall where that place. So there are some institutions like, for example, the Global Fund. Yeah, Global Fund. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Also, they do a lot of funding. Also, you can look up London School, London School of Tropical Hygiene. What else? Um, yeah. Whenever those um avenues pops up my timeline, I'll definitely share it on our group chat. Yeah. So yeah. So I hope I was able to answer your question, but
Yes, sir. There's also another question.
please. Sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm listening, Magnus.
I'm sorry, it skipped my mind now. I'm going to call when I remember. I'm going to, yeah, probably before the end of the session.
All right, no problem. Anybody else? Yetunde, Oluwaseun.
Yeah, so based on what you explained to us, I want to ask on data collection tools. If there are other tools that we can use apart from questionnaires and
Oh,
that are very
uh,
effective.
okay. So yeah, so a questionnaire is basically so a survey. All right. So but other tools can be maybe, yeah, blood samples. You can, let's say, for example, a blood pressure meter is a data collection tool. Okay. You want to find out what's the blood pressure, what's the prevalence of high blood pressure amongst people who are 9 to 5 hours or 9 to 5 workers. All right. So you can use a BP machine. Some BP machine can help you, collect those information and store them for you. So yeah, things like that. An HbA1c meter. So it's a collection, is a tool collection, is a data collection tool. An HbA1c meter is used to check for the hemoglobin levels of people with just basically hemoglobin levels, but the pathophysiologically, people with lesser levels of HbA1c in their hemoglobin, means that their blood is quite well controlled. So, yeah, so those are other ways. Those are two basically means anything that helps you in your research to get data. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Badmus, you can go on. Yashon, was I able to answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. So, Badmus, you're raising your hand. You can go on. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, sir. So the question I wanted to ask was, in Nigeria, we have government bodies that conduct research, just like you said, that they funded. One government body was able to fund it. I can't recall the name now. Now, when they get the research results, do is it like they have a database that is accessible to the public, or it's just accessible to private? I don't know, probably just for government use. It's accessible to, I don't know, uh, private institutions that want to use it, or as a student if you want to use such databases, because the and is it free? So because I currently use just research whenever I want to probably just check stuff like that. And there are some, but majority of these research papers you get on Google Scholars, most of them are paid, and you don't get something that is Nigerian, that is within the Nigerian scope, usually for countries outside, like for other countries. So I just wanted to ask question in that with that regards.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, Badmus. All right, so I'm pretty sure what you're asking for is sources of all these studies basically. So one of the major sources we have are journals, basically online journals, publication websites. But a more local example I'd like to cite is recently the cholera outbreak in Nigeria. I know that if you go to the Lagos State Ministry of Health website, those are avenues where if you follow them, if you follow I follow the Lagos State Ministry quite well. They have their yeah, on their social media pages they share this documents. There are documents that have records and of these findings from their study. So it depends. It depends. So before you conduct the research, you know who and who needs that information. Okay, some information are needed in house. They are not to be later. They're not like for public consumption. Maybe like a health facility, standard survey. You want to survey the all the PhDs in Nigeria. You want to know, the level of standard. Not necessarily do you want the public to have that kind of information. You just want stakeholders, the politicians. You want to let them know, oh, this is what we have on ground. This PhD is not functional. We need so and so and so information. Do you understand? But for the general public consumption like ourselves, we can get these informations from different journals. And locally, actually, we have local journals. Actually, we do. But the problem we have is that in terms of reputation, they are not ranking high. Although you can get reliable data from this. For example, we have the Nigeria Post Medical MDCN. It is MDCN or NPMJ, Nigerian Medical Postgraduate Studies, Nigerian School of Postgraduate Medical Studies, whatever they call it. They put out studies too. I assisted with a study that was published there by the the CMD, the last two former CMD, that's the Professor Oshibogwon of Community Health Department, along with Dr. Oluwole Esther. We did a study on medication adherence and compliance amongst people who are undergoing hypertensive treatment. Yeah, so studies like that are on those pages are locally available. Did you get? Yeah, but there should be no fright, in terms of where you're getting your information from. As much as you have access to it, and when you make reference to it, whosoever you are writing to is able to use information, whatever you're getting, whatever it is you're getting it from. Do you understand? Yeah, which other source do we have locally available information? Unfortunately, some bodies available to us locally are not necessarily performing their information. All right. Every ministry ideally should have means by which every ministry should be carrying out research on a regular basis, and they should have means by which they communicate their findings to the public. But I don't think it's that ideally part of the world. Yeah. But I know that some private bodies, carry out this research on their own, and these informations are up on their website. For example, the one I follow a lot is Budget. Budget is a is a is a private body that carry out research on government funding on local projects. I follow Budget. I follow Statistica. Yeah, they provide information on locally available information within Nigeria. Yeah, so that's it. Did I do well with answering your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
All right. Thank you so much, Moses, for the class. You really talked a while lot today. Well,
Thanks.
really appreciate you for your insights and teachings. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. I'll send an announcement concerning the assignments. I think we gave an assignment this class, and also concerning the award, I'll send it to the group chat for the rest of the students. They will know. They will know into this class. I'm actually quite disappointed with today's turnout. I don't know why, but it's fine. And the recording will be uploaded on YouTube too, and on Google Classroom. So you can always watch this lecture. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
So I think usually that happens with whenever a session is recorded. There's a possibility to always go back to see, but it's still good. It's all good. All right, guys. Have a good night, everyone. Our time is fast spent. Good night.
Good night.